Democratic member of the House Oversight and Reform and Armed Services Committee. He is also a Progressive Caucus Deputy Whip. Congressman, welcome back to the broadcast. It's good to see you. May I get your reaction to something I wasn't able to get to with Ali and intended to, but that being the representatives Clyde and Gomert, who are being fined $5,000 apiece now because they've evaded the House metal detectors. It is now a rule that one must go through those metal detectors. I heard Clyde saying that it was a violation of his constitutional rights, because it was delaying him. I mean, there's a lot more to it than just that.
Alex, I really don't understand it. I mean, when you go to work, you can't say I'm an MSNBC anchor, so security doesn't apply. Yeah. I'll just go wherever I want. I mean, most people, when they work, realize they have to comply with security.
That's right.
So when you're in the Congress, you're not something special. There's a workplace, there are rules. And we comply, right? I mean, I think what offends these members of Congress, they're so used to being put up on a pedestal that it just feels offensive to them that they have to do something every other American has to do. And I really think it's arrogance, and that's why it's all upsetting.
Okay, well put on that. Let's start with COVID relief, though, officially here. I know that you, sir, have long championed $2,000 direct payments. You have President Biden's proposal for $1,400 checks. The White House was pressed on Biden's campaign promise of $2,000 checks. First, let's take a listen to that.
There was $600 payments, as you know, in the $900 billion package that passed in December. This is $1,400. Together, that's $2,000. So it would be delivering on the promise he made, and it's something that he is firmly sticking by.
Jen Psaki's description there, $600 and $1,400, those amounts, do they add up to the $2,000 that you want to see?
Well, I think we should be giving an additional $2,000 check. Now, I believe President Biden may have understood it as $600 plus $1,400. The main thing, though, is that this should be monthly. And second, we shouldn't be restricting the middle class and working class from getting it. I mean, some of the people are saying to cut it off at $50,000. That means if an individual is making $60,000, $70,000, they're not going to get it. That would be a big mistake, especially because they're looking at the incomes from 2019, and they're not considering those who have had reduction in hours, reduction in income this year. So means testing it, excluding the middle class, excluding some of the working class, would be a big mistake.
So when you propose $2,000 a month, we're not just talking about a COVID relief package and it's a one-shot deal. What kind of pushback do you get on that? I imagine one of the first things is people say we can't afford that.
You're absolutely right. And I say, well, we spent $8 trillion on COVID relief. A lot of it has gone to corporations. A lot of it has gone to institutions. Why is it that when it comes to ordinary Americans, we can't afford to help them with their rent payments, with their kids, with their food payments? And the second thing is people say, well, let's do it through unemployment. There was a study recently that says 75% of people who are unemployed are not getting unemployment benefits. And I recommend the study. There are a lot of reasons. They don't know whether to claim them, how to claim them. That's why just getting a check to people is the most efficient way of making sure Americans have health.
What about the $15 an hour minimum federal minimum wage increase? I know you've supported that. You heard President Biden say he doesn't think it's going to make it into the final bill. There are multiple op-eds that raise questions about whether now is the right time for that. They suggest the increase would negatively impact small businesses that have been struggling during the pandemic. It is their employees that would be the ones most receiving that kind of a federal minimum wage increase. So what do you say to that?
It's just not factually true. Look at the economic studies. Professor Dubey has studied it. And if you have a minimum wage that is at 80% of median income, and the median wage in America, median income is about $19 an hour, 80%, it has no impact on employment. Other studies have shown that where it does have an impact is people will require high school degrees. So maybe it would mean some teenagers may not be able to get as many jobs, but for many Americans who are doing this full time, they're going to get a raise, and it's going to have a raise for the working class. We have to fight this and make sure it's in reconciliation. It would be a colossal mistake not to include this in the package. The House can pass it with $15, and then we ought to, in conference, insist that it's in the final package. I don't think we should unilaterally strip it from this bill.
I wasn't aware of that study that you cited. And so the good thing that you said that really jumped out to me is that high schoolers would have to finish high school. They couldn't just drop out for the short term to get out there and work. I understand there may be financially pressing issues in their home or whatever their situation may be. But the fact is, if you think long term, at least they would have to get a high school degree.
That's what the recent studies show. I mean, this has been actually studied, and they say, yes, it would have an impact on teenagers who don't have a high school degree, but most employers pay the $15 and they require a high school diploma. And 90% of Americans get a high school diploma. So we want to make sure that that gets to as close to 100%.
Right.
But there have been so many economists who've studied this, and it just doesn't have a negative impact on employment. And the reason is because when you pay people more, they're also spending, and that creates employment, and the creation of employment overcomes any of the potential loss of employment.
Okay, let's talk COVID now, because this week you urged the Biden administration to consider a single-dose vaccine strategy. Scientific research thus far on the vaccine shows no long-term efficacy after one dose of the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. What's been the reaction to your suggestion, as well as your request to try to gather further data on the effects of just one dose of the vaccine?
Well, Alex, I spoke to Dr. Osterholm and a number of other doctors, and their concern is that in 6 to 12 weeks, we're going to see a surge because of all the variants. Everyone believes we need to have 2 shots. The question is, how long can you space them out? There's studies that show that after 28 days, the effectiveness of one dose is about 80%. There's studies from Britain showing that. And then the question is, how long can you space out that second shot before the effectiveness wears off? Some people are suggesting it could be as much as 3 to 6 months. I don't have all the answers. What I do know is that the CDC should convene the group to get all the data from the scientists. And I actually respect President Biden to make the judgment. I just want to make sure he gets all the data so he can make that judgment.
Yeah, well, I got to say, I was reading an LA Times headline last night that suggested even people going for their first dosage in the next week are going to be unable to do so because you've got so many people in line right now for a second dose. I mean, it's a hot mess. That being said, what about President Biden? Can't believe I said vice. I mean, it's been a couple weeks now.
I've done that too. I've done that too.
Thank you. I appreciate that's generous of you. Anyway, he gave his first foreign policy speech, rolling back Trump's isolationist agenda and returning the U.S. to standing with our allies. The president wants to end arms sales to other support as well to Saudi Arabia for the war in Yemen. I know that you, sir, have been leading on this from the start. You've proposed cutting off all funding for the war in Yemen. Are you encouraged by what you heard from President Biden?
I'm very encouraged. It's a bold step. It's a moral step, and I give the president enormous credit. But the people I give the most credit to are the human rights activists and the online communities who for years have been telling us we should not be supporting the Saudis and their bombing campaign in Yemen. It's one of the greatest humanitarian catastrophes. There's a risk of famine that could literally take the lives of millions. The president is finally helping America change course, and this is going to help bring an end to the war.
California.